The year 2018 marked a significant turning point in Bangladesh's political landscape. A student-led movement, fueled by growing discontent with the country's quota system in public service, shook the nation to its very core. This seemingly innocuous policy, originally designed to uplift marginalized communities, had become a source of deep division and widespread unrest. The quota movement, as it came to be known, exposed the raw nerves of inequality and highlighted the urgent need for social justice in Bangladesh. At the heart of the movement was a fundamental question: how does a nation balance the ideals of meritocracy with the imperative of fair representation? For decades, Bangladesh had grappled with this complex dilemma. The quota system, a legacy of its tumultuous birth and subsequent struggles, had become deeply entrenched in the country's governance and societal fabric. It reserved a significant percentage of government jobs and educational opportunities for specific groups, including the families of Liberation War veterans and historically disadvantaged communities. However, over time, the system became riddled with complexities and contradictions, making it difficult to navigate. Critics argued that it had strayed far from its original intent, creating new forms of exclusion and perpetuating a cycle of dependency. The youth in particular felt increasingly marginalized and disillusioned. They saw their aspirations for a meritocratic and equitable society being stifled by a system they perceived as outdated and fundamentally unfair. What began as murmurs of discontent soon transformed into a roaring wave of protest, sweeping across the nation. Students from all walks of life, united by a shared sense of injustice and a common cause, took to the streets. Their demands were clear and unequivocal: an end to the quota system and a level playing field for all. The quota movement was not just about jobs or educational opportunities, it was about something much deeper. It was about dignity, equality, and the fundamental right to shape one's own destiny, free from systemic barriers and biases. To understand the complexities of the quota movement, one must delve into the historical context of its emergence. Bangladesh's quota system is deeply intertwined with the country's struggle for independence and the subsequent challenges of nation building. Born out of the ashes of a brutal liberation war in 1971, Bangladesh inherited a society grappling with deep-seated inequalities and the scars of conflict. The quota system was conceived as a form of affirmative action, a means to uplift those who had been historically marginalized and disadvantaged. The families of Liberation War veterans who had sacrificed their lives for the birth of the nation were accorded special privileges. Similarly, quotas were reserved for historically marginalized communities, such as the indigenous population, and those from economically disadvantaged backgrounds. The rationale behind the quota system was rooted in the principles of social justice and national unity. It aimed to address historical injustices and provide opportunities for those who had been denied access to education and employment. The government at the time believed that such measures were essential to heal the wounds of the past and forge a more inclusive society. However, like many well-intentioned policies, the implementation of the quota system was fraught with challenges. The lack of clear criteria for identifying beneficiaries, coupled with bureaucratic inefficiencies, led to widespread allegations of corruption and nepotism. Over time, the system, initially designed to empower the marginalized, became a tool for political patronage and social division. The narrative surrounding the quota system in Bangladesh underwent a significant transformation in the decades following independence. What began as a policy rooted in the ideals of social justice and national unity gradually became entangled with the complexities of economic development and generational aspirations. The Liberation War generation, once hailed as heroes, found their sacrifices being questioned by a younger generation facing a different set of challenges. As Bangladesh transitioned from a war-torn nation to a developing economy, the focus shifted towards economic growth and competitiveness. The rise of globalization and the increasing demand for skilled labor created new pressures on the education and employment sectors. The quota system, once seen as a necessary measure for social justice, began to be perceived by some as a barrier to progress. The youth, in particular, felt increasingly disillusioned. They argued that the quota system limited their opportunities and hampered their ability to compete in a globalized world. The fact that a significant portion of government jobs and educational seats were reserved for specific groups, regardless of merit, fueled resentment and frustration. Moreover, the economic landscape of Bangladesh had changed dramatically since the introduction of the quota system. While some sections of society had benefited from economic liberalization and globalization, others remained trapped in poverty and deprivation. The quota system, designed for a different era, seemed ill-equipped to address the new realities of a rapidly changing world. Section 4. A generation's cry growing discontent and the demand for reform. By the turn of the 21st century, the discontent with the quota system in Bangladesh had reached a boiling point, with protests becoming a common sight. The youth, who constitute a significant portion of the country's population, felt increasingly marginalized and unheard, their voices drowned out by systemic issues. They saw the quota system as a symbol of systemic inequality and a barrier to their aspirations for a better future. A future they felt slipping away. The grievances against the quota system were multifaceted, touching on various aspects of their lives and futures. Students from underprivileged backgrounds, who were supposed to be the primary beneficiaries of the system, often found themselves competing with those from more affluent families within the reserved quota, creating an uneven playing field. This created a sense of disillusionment and frustration, as it seemed that the system was perpetuating inequalities within the very groups it was meant to uplift, rather than providing the support they needed. Furthermore, the perception of widespread corruption and nepotism within the quota system eroded public trust, making it difficult for any reforms to gain traction. Allegations of fake certificates, manipulation of quotas, and political interference in the allocation process were rampant, adding to the sense of injustice. This fueled a sense of injustice and anger, particularly among those who felt that they were being denied opportunities based on their background rather than their merit, a sentiment that was growing stronger by the day. The government's attempts to address the growing discontent through piecemeal reforms proved insufficient, as they failed to address the root causes of the issues. While some adjustments were made to the quota percentages, the fundamental structure of the system remained unchanged, leaving many feeling that their concerns were not being taken seriously. The youth, tired of empty promises and half-hearted measures, demanded a complete overhaul of the quota system, a system they saw as fundamentally flawed. They called for a merit-based system that provided equal opportunities for all, regardless of their background or social status, a system that would truly reflect their aspirations and potential. Section 5, the Year of Defiance, Unraveling the 2018 Quota Reform Protests. The year 2018 witnessed the eruption of long-simmering discontent into a full-blown movement that would forever alter the political landscape of Bangladesh. The streets of Dhaka and other major cities became the battlegrounds for a new kind of civil resistance. The quota reform protests, as they came to be known, were unprecedented in their scale, intensity, and impact. They represented a collective cry for justice and equality from a generation that felt marginalized and unheard. What began as a series of scattered demonstrations by students quickly morphed into a nationwide movement that brought the country to a standstill. The sheer number of participants and the passion they displayed were unlike anything seen before. The protests were sparked by a seemingly minor incident, but it was the tipping point for years of pent-up frustration. In April 2018, a group of students from Dhaka University demanding reforms to the quota system were attacked by members of the ruling party's student wing. This incident was not isolated, but part of a broader pattern of suppression. This act of violence, captured on camera and widely circulated on social media, ignited a firestorm of outrage across the country. The power of social media in mobilizing and uniting the students was unprecedented. Students from universities and colleges across Bangladesh poured onto the streets, demanding an end to the quota system and justice for the victims of the Dhaka University attack. Their unity and resolve were unshakable. The protests were characterized by their decentralized nature, their reliance on social media for mobilization, and the active participation of women who played a leading role in shaping the movement's message and strategy. Women's voices were particularly influential in driving the narrative. The demands of the protesters were clear and unwavering: the complete abolition of the quota system in public service and education. They sought a fair and just system for all. They argued that the system was inherently discriminatory and perpetuated a culture of mediocrity. The existing system, they believed, stifled true talent and innovation. Instead, they called for a merit-based system that rewarded talent and hard work regardless of one's background. This was a call for a future where everyone had an equal chance to succeed. The quota reform protests were not just about quotas. They were about fundamental rights, equal opportunities, and the aspirations of a generation determined to shape its own destiny. This movement was a defining moment in the fight for a more equitable society.